Okay, hi everyone. Yeah, as Heather said, I'm Kelsey from Lakota People's Law Project, which is a subsidiary of the Romero Institute. You may have heard of it. We're downtown. We're a social justice policy think tank, and we're located behind Cafe Mare, kind of next to Woodstocks in the Galleria. And our constitutional lawyer is Daniel Sheehan, and we also have a climate change initiative called Green Power. So we do a lot of different stuff, but the Lakota People's Law Project is a project that we started about 10 years ago, and what it does is it focuses on Native children who are taken from Native homes and put into white foster care. And so what we're doing out in the Pine Ridge Reservation and the Standing Rock Sioux Reservation is that we're trying to implement 4E programs that would effectively create indigenous child protective services within the reservation. So getting Lakota people actually involved in that kind of process when children are taken. But yeah, so that's a little bit of background of what Lakota People's Law Project actually does. And so for me, my experience of going out to Standing Rock was my boss told me like a week before we left, she was like, hey, do you want to go to North Dakota and go out to Standing Rock for the No DAPL protest? And I was like, I definitely do. And so I bought a bunch of cold gear, and me and Danny Sheehan, our constitutional lawyer, and Artie, our press director, all drove out to North Dakota. And so I'm going to bring a little note out because I'm not super prepared. But so we were out there from November 23rd to December 5th. So while we were driving out there, we were actually in Colorado when the November 20th confrontation at the bridge happened, when they used a water cannon and rubber bullets on the water protectors. So we were not there for that, but when we got in, the first night I was there, I actually spent the night in a hotel room with a water protector who had a giant bruise on his body from a rubber bullet. So as soon as I got there, it was very real that people are going through this, and this is the violence they're kind of living through right now. And so, yeah, I'm going to tell you about my time at camp and some things that I witnessed and give you a general update. So that's kind of a roadmap for where I'm going. So the first day that I got to camp, I got to Oceti Sakowin. They have you do media training and direct action orientation. So the media training, there are very strict rules for media, and I don't think a lot of people understand this when they're, at home and reading news stories. There are lots of things you cannot take pictures of because you are a guest on Lakota land. And so being a guest on Lakota land means you have to follow Lakota law. And so for instance, you cannot take a picture of the sacred fire. You cannot take a picture of the preparation of food because that is a sacred art. And so there are a lot of things that you have to go through to be able to understand how to be a good ally in a Lakota space. The direct action orientation was really interesting, and I want to tell you guys about it because the direct action orientation is something that happens every day at 2 p.m. And you have to go to direct action in order to go to the front lines, or at least you're supposed to be able to. And so direct action teaches you, basic nonviolent principles, how to deal with mace, rubber bullets. And there are a list of principles that you see right when you get to camp, and they're also at the end of Flag Road, which is like the main drag of Oceti Sakowin. And the big principle that everybody really emphasizes when you're at camp is this is ceremony, so you need to act accordingly. There are no drugs, there are no alcohol at camp, there is no alcohol at camp, and people take these rules very seriously. There are a lot of people online that are saying, don't go to Standing Rock, it's not a party, and that's very accurate. When you're at camp, this is a sacred space. You are standing on sacred Lakota land, and you need to treat it accordingly. So yeah, just to kind of put that out there, direct action training is very important. And so there's a prayer meeting every morning at camp. I think there's one at 6 and there's one at 8. I was never up for the 6 a.m. one, but there is one. And that's around the sacred fire. It's normally a gathering of elders and people that, want to offer tobacco to the sacred fire, offer prayer to the sacred water. And then there's also the direct action meeting every day. One of the things that I was there for on the first day, or the second day that I was there, was the occupation of Turtle Island that happened on Thanksgiving, which is, Thanksgiving. And Thanksgiving is a day of mourning for Indigenous people for obvious reasons that I probably don't need to mention. And so Turtle Island is an island that is off of Cannonball River, which is a tributary of the Missouri River. And they have police on it, and they eventually put razor wire on it. So Turtle Island is an ancient burial ground of the Lakota Sioux Nations. It's a very important space. So on November 24th, several hundred people took it over, and it was really awesome. I'm really, really lucky to have been there for it. So what they did is they built a bridge. They built it out of styrofoam and wood in a matter of 30 minutes, and they crossed the Cannonball River and occupied it for probably about 2 or 3 hours. They did ceremony on it, and it was really cool. Morton County Police actually backed up eventually. They were like, "You're being aggressive." They were on the top of the hill, and they were like, "You're being really aggressive. Stop wearing gas masks and bandanas over your face." But eventually, they kind of eased back because it would have been really, really bad PR for Morton County Police to use violence against Native Americans on Thanksgiving. And so that was one of the cooler things that I witnessed while I was there. And there was also a women's march where they marched to the barricade on a couple days later on Highway 1806, which is the highway that goes past Oceti Sakowin. Their barricade is still currently in place despite the easement denial. But women were very, very active. In the time that I was there, it seems like this movement was kind of a movement that was built by women. The entire idea of Oceti Sakowin is the thought child of several elder women, and I think that's really cool and really important to note. So I just want to kind of from here go on to some of the intricacies of living at camp for a couple weeks. So there was always work to do, and everybody kind of pulls their weight, and there's this kind of pull your weight kind of ethos at camp that, you're not there to just take pictures and feel good about yourself for being there. There's always porta potties to clean, there's wood to chop, there's dishes to do in the kitchens, and it was really, really humbling to be there and feel like you need to have to be doing something at all times, to kind of pull your weight at camp. One thing that I noticed that I wanted to share with you all is that every time you talk to somebody at camp, or at least in my personal experience, you say "stay safe" at the end of a conversation. And I think that's really telling of what kind of situation the water protectors are in, that every time you end a conversation, instead of "see you later," they say "stay safe." So yeah. And one of the things that I witnessed there also is that the medical tent, the Standing Rock Medic and Healer Council, they are doing a fantastic job. And I literally cannot put it in words how wonderful they are as people. Any case of acute hypothermia, of a sprained, limb, or any kind of injury, they were on top of it. So if you're going to donate to people, I highly, highly, highly recommend donating to the Standing Rock Medic and Healer Council. You can find them on Facebook, you can Google their website, and they're really good. The medics that I've met on the ground there are some of the most selfless people I think I've met in my entire life. They also have a legal tent, which I wanted to mention, which is the Water Protectors Legal Collective. That is a subsidiary of the National Lawyers Guild. What they do is they bail people out when they've been arrested on the front lines, and they're really great. They offer medical or legal advice to anyone who needs it, and their tent is kind of right up on Facebook Hill in Oceti Sakowin, which is where the only place you can access Facebook. But yeah, those are the two groups that I'd really like to highlight in this. So some of the things that I was there for when I was at camp was, other than the 2.5 blizzards that I was there for, I got to witness the response to Governor Dalrymple's evacuation order in North Dakota, which was really crazy because, the governor of North Dakota made an order that he was going to evacuate people based on the concern for public safety. When the Lakota Sioux people have been there since time immemorial, and they lived in the winter for literally thousands of years, he was worried that these Native Americans can't handle, winter conditions in North Dakota. And so I got to see the Indigenous Environmental Network, a representative from Standing Rock, and a couple other notable people in the media kind of movement for Standing Rock give a press conference kind of telling Governor Dalrymple off. So you can find it on our Facebook, facebook.com/Lakotalaw. And that was really interesting. I also got to witness the veterans arriving, and that was probably like the most rewarding part of my trip, is that seeing like buses full of veterans showing up at Standing Rock. And I talked to a lot of them, and a lot of them said the same thing, in essence of, I took an oath to defend my country from threats, foreign or domestic, and this is a domestic threat, and I will not stand for my government using this kind of force against its own people. And a lot of people, veterans or not veterans, said the same thing in the sense that November 20th was a really big motivating force for coming out. That the day that they used water cannons in sub-zero temperatures, they used rubber bullets that, destroyed a girl's arm. They took out a 13-year-old's eye. That was really the moment where they decided, it's time to go. And there are a lot of veterans that are still there. Quite a few have left after the December 5th denial of the easement, but there are quite a few there. They built permanent structures. I have a lot of pictures of the barracks being built. And so there are quite a few veterans, Veterans for Peace, for instance. I talked to, they said that we are here till the very end, and that doesn't mean DAPL's easement being denied. The very end means that the drill pad is not in place, and that they don't just reroute Dakota Access, but Dakota Access is dead. And there's also a group of veterans that are going to Flint, and I'm sure you guys have heard about that. But so the day that the easement was denied, on December 4th, I don't think I've ever seen so much energy in one collective group of people ever before. Me and Danny Shingan, our lawyer, we were live streaming, and then all of a sudden just people start screaming in the background, and there's people crying, and they're sledding down hills, and it was really, really crazy. But one thing that I wanted to note about the easement being denied is that even though President Obama denied the easement for the Dakota Access Pipeline, that does not mean that it's not over. The floodlights are still up every single night at camp. The Highway 1806 barricade is still in place with razor wire and all, despite the fact that it is a public pipeline owned and paid for by taxpayers, which is a violation of the law. Even though it's federal land, you still can't do that. And so what has happened since, as a little bit of an update, is so the sacred fire for the Oceti Sakowin has been put out by request of the elders, but there has been a new fire lit called the Oceti Oyate, which means the People's Camp or All Nations Camp. So there are about 1,000 protectors that are still at camp, and they're going to remain there until the drill pad has been moved, until they are no longer even close to Lake Oahe, which is drilling under the Missouri River. And right now, or tomorrow, the high temperature estimate for Cannonball, North Dakota is -15, and that's the high. And so they're expecting a -50-degree wind chill by the end of this week. And so just to put that in context of what the water protectors, these 1,000 people, are willing to do in order to protect water. So in conclusion, what you can do to kind of help keep the momentum up for this Stand with Standing Rock is, stay connected, stay engaged. Keep using those hashtags, keep sharing and posting. It sounds like it's trivial, but it's really not. This entire movement has been kind of built on the backs of people on the ground, but it has been thrusted into international stardom because of social media. And I work in social media, so I'm a little bit biased, but at the same time, the support of people like you is really, really important for things like this. And then, donate to like fair, equitable sources, please. And then defund and divest. So the defund DAPL movement is like larger than ever right now. And if you go to Lakotalaw.org, you'll see that we have a resolution where you can hand it into your bank and you'll be like, I'm divesting from you, Wells Fargo, and this is why. And it's because of their holds in the Dakota Access Pipeline. So I highly, highly recommend you do that. And also, while you're at it, please sign our petition at Lakotalaw.org to keep the pressure on Obama while he is still in office, because with a coming Trump administration, we have to make sure that we use all the tools in our arsenal right now to make sure that we use everything we can to keep the feds from stopping this pipeline. So yeah, Lakotalaw.org. I'm Kelsey Hill, signing off. I do believe I'm taking questions, actually. So, you!
What does it mean, actually, I don't know if I'm sounding ignorant, what does it mean to be on the front lines when you're training for action and then you go to the front lines? What does that look like?
That's a great question. I should have clarified that. So there's the reservation line, and that's kind of split by a section of the Missouri River. And on one side is Rosebud Camp, and then on a bluff there's Sacred Stone Camp, and then there's Oceti Sakowin on the other side of the river. So Oceti Sakowin is not on reservation territory. It's on unceded territory from the 1851 Fort Laramie Treaty. So the reason Rosebud and Sacred Stone kind of exist is because they're protected by the reservation. To be on the front line means that you either are at the barricade on Highway 1806, where the police have blocked it off. That's where the confrontation on November 20th happened. Or you are on Turtle Island, which is where the confrontation, where people were in the river and they were being sprayed. I think that happened late October. Those are the two areas of the front lines. And so the front lines have never technically come into camp, but when you do direct action training, they tell you no kids, no puppies, there are a lot of dogs in camp, actually, but don't bring vulnerable people to the front lines. You also have medics on standby at the front lines versus at camp they have a spot. And so the front lines are just increased danger, increased risk. You're normally being stared at by a bunch of police and bearcats, and that's what the front lines is. I got this patch.
So there's a camp at the front lines, is that right, or no?
There was a camp at the front lines. They had a camp called the Treaty Camp on October 27th, but that was the camp that was raided. So they haven't touched Oceti Sakowin, but they raided the Treaty Camp, which was only probably 200 people. But that was because they made a camp on Highway 1806. But it is of my belief that Morton County kind of drew first blood in the sense that they erected a stone barricade with razor wire on a public highway. But yeah. Thanks for that question. Anyone else have a question?
I have a question.
Yeah.
I was there at the same time,
Mm-hmm.
and there was a blizzard that very heavily affected a lot of people, and then there were announcements made that the tribal chairman was asking people to leave.
Mm-hmm.
So how does the camp that exists now deal with that? That's my question.
That's a really good question. So Lakota People's Law Project is in a particular situation where we have a constitutional lawyer named Danny Sheehan, and then we have our attorney on the ground named Chase Ironeyes. And Chase is kind of positioned himself to be the spokesperson for this new camp called Oceti Oyate. And so because Chase lives closely and he goes to camp every single day, we've kind of put ourselves in a place where, we are being very respectful to Archambault's response. But I think that one thing to keep in mind is that as a tribal chairman, if someone gets hurt, someone dies, it's kind of on him. And so by him asking people to leave and to go home, he is negating himself of risk, which is a totally understandable thing for a leadership position to do. Chase Iron Eyes is kind of putting himself as a leadership position in the Oceti Oyate by saying, if you come to camp and if you stay here, you are doing so at your own risk. But you know, like, he's asking people to come fully self-sustainable, even though there are kitchens and there are medics and there are donations for clothing. You still need to be able to handle yourself in sub-zero temperatures. You know, don't come with a tent, come with stuff to build a structure so you can handle yourself. But I don't know if that answers your question fully, but yeah, that's kind of where we're at as Lakota People's Law Project. Any other questions? Yeah.
What's the status of any legal action against the barricade on public land?
The Water Protectors Legal Collective, the WPLC, a subsidiary of the National Lawyers Guild, they have actually sent a cease and desist to Morton County Police, and they've demanded the resignation of their prosecutor, because their prosecutor has been really unfair in court. But they have demanded or they have issued a cease and desist for the barricade, because now that, you know, the Army Corps of Engineers have been told to stand down by President Obama, the barricade is unconstitutional, like, for lack of a better word. And so that happened a day or two ago. Don't quote me on that, but you can look that up, Water Protectors Legal Collective. So they are taking action against that. The parent company of the Dakota Access is trying to sue the water protectors. Yeah, which I don't think is going to go anywhere. Also, the Water Protectors Legal Collective is asking the courts of North Dakota to allow out-of-state lawyers to represent the water protectors that have been arrested on the front lines. I don't know how that's going to go. I can't speak to it, but that is a motion that is currently underway. So, yeah. Any other questions? Yeah.
Yeah, I was wondering if this presentation is going to be uploaded onto Facebook. And
Yep.
then also another question, what do you feel is like a couple ideas of the best way to donate?
Yeah. So, yeah, it will be uploaded to Facebook because that is my job, to upload it. But I can't say when, probably by Sunday. I can guarantee that. And for donations, I know that specifically today, somebody I know on the ground that is working with digital smoke signals. I don't know if you guys know them. They're like the drone people. Yeah, they're really cool. They're actually like the eyes behind the barricade. You know, they're seeing what construction is doing. They need hard drives, and I know that. I don't know exactly right now how to tell you how to get those hard drives to them, but I could, if you come talk to me afterward, I could give you my contact information, because they need hard drives to, you know, transfer material so that we here in California and everywhere else can kind of access what's going on, because drone footage is fairly large in size. Other than that, I would recommend donating to the Standing Rock Medic and Healer Council, the Water Protector Legal Collective, because they're still, you know, paying off bonds, and they're still responsible for court fees for people who cannot pay that were arrested on the front lines, and then also the StandingRockSiouxTribe.org, or StandingRockSiouxTribe.org, or something like that. But I would not recommend donating to Sacred Stone or Rosebud, because they are on reservation territory, and they have received quite a few funds. But, and I can explain further in detail to you personally, but yeah, those are my donation recommendations.
Okay, great, thanks.
Mm-hmm, no problem. Yeah.
What's the best way to keep this momentum going?
As a social media person, I'm gonna say hashtags, but in reality, I think that the holiday season is having, you know, a little bit of a dragging effect on this, just because people are gonna go home. You know, they're gonna go home to their families, and they're gonna come back after the 1st. And I think that a lot of people are gonna go to camp right around the 21st of January for some weird reason. So yeah, I would say the momentum right now is probably a little low. But I would say keep posting things, especially like live updates from camp are a really good way to remind yourself that people are hanging out in negative 15-degree temperatures, and they are tough in it. Even if this movement seems like it's slowed down, like they're out there and they're doing it for the water. So, keep updated on Facebook. Make sure that you know what's happening on both, the social side and the legal side. And I really want to say that right around January 21st is going to change a lot. So don't quote me on that, but because I'm not Nostradamus. But a lot of people in the media at camp, the Indigenous Environmental Network, Digital Smoke Signals, people like that have been very clear that they are remaining vigilant in the, because of the administration change. So yeah.
I have a question. I understand that it's the Energy Transfer Partners Corporation that is behind the DAPL, and I believe it's a Chinese company, is what I understand, and that they've taken fracked oil and they're going to transport it all the way down to Gulf of Mexico and then sell it out of the country. It's not even our oil; it's taking oil from our land and profiting by selling it and moving it from our own country. So there's that, but I've heard, my real question is that I've heard there's legal action being taken to, get people out of jail and pay fees and isn't. But what about on the bigger scale? The Energy Transfer Partners are breaking laws at the wazoo, and there's so many, human rights that are being violated, constitutional rights. When there's all this violence happening and we don't have freedom of assembly or freedom of press or freedom of speech, et cetera, and violence against people and false arrests and all that, what is being done? Is Daniel Sheehan doing anything about that? Or is anybody going after the corporation, take them to court for the violations? I don't hear about that. Do you know anything about that?
I do know that Danny is being very vigilant about reminding people that this is foreign oil. This is like when, North Dakotans say this is creating jobs, this isn't creating oil that's even going to go to Americans. As for the actual legal aspect, I cannot answer that because I'm not sure, because I want to say the reason that I don't really know that is because I've been more focusing on the fact that Rick Perry, who sits on the board of Energy Transfer Partners, has just been, named as Secretary of Energy. So that, is a ginormous conflict of interest. And I think that happened 2 days ago. And so I am not really sure what that's going to mean for the No DAPL movement. But a lot of people are, saying that, like, this means war. And but that's a really good question, and I'm going to spend some time researching it.
I haven't heard anything about that.
Yeah, I haven't either.
If I hit anybody in the face, I would get thrown in jail big time. And a corporation is breaking laws, major constitutional rights and everything else, and they can't be touched.
Yeah.
I don't hear about that. Yeah, it's nice that we get people out of jail and we're doing some, medical. But people are being injured, violated. Nothing being said about going after the corporation who's trespassing over sacred land, destroying the earth, violating people, everything. This is ridiculous. I could go on with the list, but I think we know already.
I can say that there are Amnesty International observers at camp. So I know that doesn't alleviate the corporation and their corporate greed at all. But for the human rights violations, after November 20th, you could always kind of find Amnesty International because they know the gravity of the situation.
Doing something too?
I didn't personally witness the ACLU, but I know ACLU North Dakota has been on the ground for like
and also
many
United
months.
Nations are involved in something.
The what?
United Nations?
Yeah. Well, Amnesty International is an NGO under the UN. But yeah, I'll bring this to Danny's attention because I've never really talked to him about it. But yeah, thank you so much. Sarah?
I think there is a class action lawsuit of people who have been injured, but I think it's against the Morton County Police.
Yeah.
Not specifically towards energy transfer partners because they're not directly harming people, mostly.
Yeah, that was my understanding of it as well. Yeah.
Just to reply to a question earlier about how to keep the momentum, and just wanting to give a shout out to local Indigenous issues in the area and just further continuance of our involvement in the stories of colonization in this area. The missions were really effective, and there's a lot of residual issues from that, but the Indigenous communities are really resilient as well, and there's a few different projects right now related to Ohlone land issues, which is the loose grouping and name for this to the Bay Area and further down south. But the Amamutan Band of Ohlones, who works and operates out of Santa Cruz and does partnership projects with the university, is potentially going to be fighting a sand mine in this county, and so that's just something to keep ears open about. And in addition to that, there's an Indigenous women-led Ohlone land trust that is being formed out of the Bay Area. Karina Gold, who's Chochenyo Ohlone, and I'm blanking on the other person's name, Jonella LaRose, who's Shoshone Bannock. The two of them are spearheading this Ohlone land trust because the Ohlone are not federally recognized tribe. There's a lot of more, that's like a whole issue that we could talk about all night, but they're essentially landless at this point, and they would like to secure a piece of land to have a land base. And so that is active and ongoing. They're in the visioning process, but it's something that will very likely need funding. So it's just planting the seeds in like more affluent communities such as Santa Cruz. And there's many other ways people can plug in to stay just connected, because the same things that are happening in North Dakota are certainly happening here. But like with the Facebook movement and the way that that really magnetized the crowd is beautiful, and it's awakening us to these issues in a broader way. And it's so lovely to be all together in that and to feel that echoes in our own hearts and have that feeling of I want to participate, I want to show up. And so yeah, just wanting to shine a little light on the things that are happening in these areas that we can really apply our energy to in positive ways and help bring momentum. And this community has like specific resources and gifts to offer those things. So anyway, there's a group, Santa Cruz Indigenous Solidarity, that myself and Lindsay and maybe some others, JT if he's around, have been part of, and we're on Facebook. You can look us up. There might be information about those things, but and you might be able to, maybe Ohlone Land Trust is on Facebook, I'm not really sure, but yeah, those are just little things to note in your pocket.
So Santa Cruz Indigenous Solidarity and Ohlone Land Trust. If you didn't hear that. Thanks so much. I should probably give the mic up to whoever after me. Thank you all so much. This was awesome. Have a wonderful night.
Yeah.